want to make this session a lot more interactive, so there'll be less questions from my side. There'll be a lot of talking that I would want Jatin to do. So, perception on spaces. Let's start with a basic question first. How do you perceive a space? What does space mean to you?
Well, the thing is, it's a very interesting thing that, we are talking about space. I think before we came here, me and my wife were also actually talking about, and she kept saying, give me space. And come to think of it, I think space is such a universal term. I think no matter what kind of art form you are with, whether it's art, design, sculpture, no matter what, the first thing that you start thinking about is from space. What is the composition for that, for all you know? I mean, the moment a photographer takes a camera, and starts composing a picture, is composing space. So I think nothing can exist without space. And I think if you get into a few more deeper layers about understanding space, at even an elemental level, when you talk about your five senses, the perception of space comes through your eyes, and that's how your smell, your feel, everything is sort of universal. But vision, when you start talking about telling people what you think and what you visualize, I mean, if I ask you to design a space, whether it's a set design or whether it's a movie set that you're doing, I mean, your perception of what you see is going to be so different from what others are seeing. Even at a metaphysical level, I mean, I think when you talk about time and space, I think, time and space is, again, such a deep subject. The moment you start thinking about space with time, it's so relative. It becomes so relative. So I think no matter what genre of art you are with, or genre of work you're related with, I think space becomes an important thing. And answering your question about how you perceive space, I mean, I think it all comes from all these elemental and physical and metaphysical aspects of giving your vision to the images that you see. I mean, the kind of images that are probably displayed here are surreal, so to say. And that comes from your mind space, again. So yeah, I mean, I think if it comes down to answering your question about perceiving space, I mean, I think it's about even taking a blank canvas, putting in color with light, and creating a visual which people haven't seen before, is space.
You mentioned that, it's subjective. It's a very, very subjective definition to give. So taking a cue from that, photography is also very subjective, and your work spans across different kind of photographies. How do you approach your work? Like, I'm sure it changes with subject, with each kind of assignment that you take on. How does it change, or does it even change?
I mean, my approach towards, I mean, I do a lot of conceptual work, and I've been lucky actually for a lot of clients who've actually trusted me with my vision of things. Like, we've shot for real estate clients, we've shot for, even luxury hotels, which have allowed me to actually express myself and what they represent through very creative ways. And my approach is actually very simple about giving a dream to people, I mean, let people see something, and the visual needs to actually inspire somebody. I mean, that's when I can justify that visual of whatever's gone into creating that visual. So, I mean, I personally feel when you're working on subjects like, even on a real estate client, for example, when you're working on brick and mortar formats, I mean, it can get very boring when it comes to seeing just the same cement and bricks and iron rods. But what you can actually do in terms of fashion, you add that element of fashion into, creating those visuals and giving people dreams in terms of how they can, like for certain images that are actually displayed here, we've even shot for spas like that. I mean, I think if I can evoke reaction with a certain visual, I think that is purely the job of a great visual. Yeah, and visual needs to tell stories.
There was this one common thread that I found between design, architecture, and photography, which is the concept of a negative space and a positive space. In architecture and design, I kind of know the definition for it. I was very curious, what is it in photography?
Well, I mean, I don't come actually from a school of photography. I'm completely self-taught. So, I've not really gone through
A very by the
an
book sort of a
articulate
learning.
study of photography. I'm pretty much self-taught, and I belong to the analog days where I used to do my own printing, and I still have my own darkroom. But I think of what I have read about how people used to teach everyone photography was about managing your negative space. For the longest time, I mean, since I've completely self-taught, I think for the longest time, I used to keep thinking use of negative space. Why are people saying use your negative space in a certain way when actually speaking, the first thing that you start doing is look at it in terms of the positive space that you have. Even when you're designing a room, for example, you talk about a breathing space, this needs to be the breathing room so that but I mean, I personally feel that it's about, whether it's any subject, whether it's a piece of art or a sculpture, it's about the story you want to tell. And that's where your use of space starts coming in. So in a photograph, if you say negative space, I mean, I'm trying really hard here to find enough space to tell stories within a picture. So I will use all the embedded layers to put every contextual element, whether it's makeup, whether it's set design, whether it's fashion, whether it's clothing, whether it's the language of my model, or even digital effects for that matter, to tell that story about the dream that I want people to start seeing after they see the picture. So when it comes to negative space or positive space, I mean, I think you can actually rework I mean, for me, any rule that is being set, the beauty about creativity is to break that rule within that rule. And that's how I approach negative or positive space when it comes to photography.
You also mentioned that you've kind of been doing sets as well. Now, doing set designing versus architecture and interior design, it's a very different concept. Tell us, why did you want to do set designing, and what is it that excites you about set design?
Well, I don't really do set design. I mean, it's my art directors who work on, we collaborate with, who do set design. But technically speaking, it's very important for one to know that the lens sees things very differently from what a human eye sees it, right? So when we are working in confined spaces of a studio, we have to recreate every element in what you see in a picture. Now, when it comes to that, you have to work within the restrictions and the parameters of what a lens and the light limited to it says. So your set design has to be in accordance to the final picture, which the lens as a limitation can actually, allow you to do. So you have to very closely work and collaborate with your art directors to be able to guide them in terms of what you want. So lenses have distortion, which needs to be accounted for when you're doing a certain set design. You can't work in already existing beautiful spaces, because light becomes an issue there. So you create your sets which will allow you to light up the way you really want them to do, and eventually the outcome will be on the visual that you're looking for. So you end up doing set designing. Color and aesthetic actually becomes a very important element in a picture. It's how your colors are complemented in a visual. So you work very closely again with your art directors and designers to give them color coding in terms of, if the girl is going to wear a beautiful white gown or a red gown, it's what kind of furniture I want, along with the kind of colors of the walls.
It's a lot more to do with conceptualization and kind of putting it together.
Yeah, because the aesthetic of the visual will come through only if everything is coordinated and, is seemingly beautiful, seamlessly beautiful to the eye.
Right. So you've been photographing for a while. If I had to ask you, which has been your best experience, so tell us an experience where you really, really enjoyed and kind of, came back with a completely new perception on spaces, what would it be?
I'm actually asked this question a lot of times, and I think I've had a consistent answer. It's the shoot that I'm doing tomorrow.
And which is it? Are you
Because,
shooting tomorrow? Which one it would be?
Yeah, so it's an ever evolving journey, right? I mean, I still go back to all my visuals and find like hundreds of mistakes in it, things that I could have probably improved. It's probably a common answer you hear from a lot of people who are really passionate about what they do. It's not, I'm not the only one who says it, but I feel it's genuinely true because when I see it for myself, I mean, I am constantly in the need and urge to improve what I've already done and probably go better. So it's very difficult to actually point out to a particular project and say, but yeah, I've been lucky enough, I must say, from all my contemporaries that I've been lucky enough where, you know, I've had a huge body of work which clients have sort of trusted me with, allowed me to express myself, represent them in the right fashion, awarded in India as well as internationally on the kind of work that we've done together. So I think there we've played sort of a nice role together, a collaborative role together to change the boundaries of how people perceive visuals.
Sure. And on the last note, if before we sign off, if you had to give this one tip or if one suggestion to budding photographers, what would it be?
Give space to your wife. I'm just kidding.
Thank you.
Give
Thank you
enough
so
space.
much.